Violating the sanctity of the dead can backfire, and you'll witness countless horrors because of it. This is not only possible but also certain, as evidenced by the experiences of those who have tried to violate the sanctity of the dead, either intentionally or ignorantly. Albert may have undergone this very experience and returned to tell us about it. Albert, a 20-something recent graduate from technical schools, embarked with some friends to work in a desert area. They were tasked by their employer to install power generators and set up electricity for more than 3 large buildings, in a job that could take several months. Albert agreed and set off with his colleagues to the job site. The site was in the desert, as mentioned, and a few kilometers from the job site, there were some areas with stones of strange shapes. Albert and his friends decided to go and inspect those stones. After finishing their work, they embarked on a journey to explore the place to pass the time. The young men noticed that the stones were placed at regular intervals, but who had placed them in such a remote area? They continued to step on those stones and tried to move some of them, but to no avail. They then returned to where they had come from and stopped at a grocery store to buy some food. During the shopping trip, Albert asked the shop owner about those nearby stones, and the man's face paled for a moment. Then he told him that they were graves. The youths, including Albert, were stunned and asked in astonishment, "Graves?" The man replied, "Yes, they are graves, and what appears from the stones are merely tombstones." The young men were shocked, for they had been walking on the bodies of the dead without realizing it. They excused themselves from the old man and returned to the apartment they were staying in. While walking back home, the youths saw a man standing among the stones, which they hadn't initially known were graves. The man appeared out of nowhere and stood lifeless, like a statue. They all stopped and looked at each other, and suddenly, the man made a swift move, disappearing behind one of the stones. The youths grew anxious, and one of them exclaimed, "Let's have dinner and go to bed. This is not a pleasure trip." So, they all went up without saying a word, as if they feared discussing the whole matter. While sitting to have dinner, the fan was spinning in front of them when suddenly the power went out. What frightened them was not this, but the fan continued to spin as if the electricity was still on. Not only that, but they also began to hear sounds of things breaking in the kitchen and bedrooms, and they didn't know who was causing it. Everyone fell silent in clear fear until they heard footsteps moving in the room, approaching them. One fearfully asked, "Did any of you move?" Everyone remained silent until someone repeated the question, and then everyone screamed and rushed outside. The power came back, and Albert found his friend, who had been asking him, standing outside, and asked him when he had left the room. He replied as soon as the power went out. They all looked at each other until they heard their colleague's voice from inside. They turned to find their friend coming out of the room, asking them why they were standing outside. They turned and did not find who had been talking to them moments ago. The next day, they went to work without anyone speaking a word. Albert dreamt that a short man with 2 horns on his head was trying to pull him towards him and glaring at him.